What is up, guys? Coach Joe here with Pound for Pound Coaching, along with Coach Phil. And today we'll be talking about the squat and how to brace and how to set up in particular. So first up, we're talking about what is the brace. Second, we'll be talking about how to brace and some common mistakes during the brace and how it affects things like foot rooting and center of mass. So yeah, let's begin.
So what we're going to talk about is what is bracing. And a great analogy that I like to use towards the athletes is kind of thinking about a soda can and if a soda can is closed or open. So for example, if a soda can is open and you were to step on it, what would happen? Obviously, it would be crushed, right? But if you were to keep it closed and it would have the circumference and pressure needed to have the weight on top, so your body on top, if you stepping on it, it'd most likely stand. This is no different to when we squat and we have the weight on our back. You as your body and your core is like a cylinder. And the whole core of your brace goes from the front to the back. All right, so we're going to talk about one more misconception of the bracing. And a lot of people, or a lot of lifters, I should say, think that the bracing comes from the belt when it actually comes from within. So the belt in itself is a supplementary for your brace. And we're going to talk about a big misconception of having a super tight belt or a super loose belt. But first, we'll talk about a super tight belt. So when we have a super tight belt, you might see a lot of lifters, they'll crank their belt against the rack or against the wall and try to make it super tight. And they think that they're creating a very supportive lumbar position, which in fact is doing the inverse. You're going to have very limited inhale and it's going to slow down the brace there and being very unsupportive. Whereas the opposite, where if it's too loose, then you're going to be stuck in extension. So we kind of have to find the fine balance in the middle. And a good thing or a good fundamental cue I kind of like to give to my lifters is when the belt is locked, you want to be able to fit 4 fingers between you and the belt while you're relaxed. And then with that extra space, we can fill in that air by expanding the diaphragm.
So now we're going to be talking about the unrack and how the brace stems from as soon as we get under the bar, basically. So when we're setting up, generally, I like to tell my athletes to get into a more extended position because it's a lot harder to get that extension if we lose it off the unrack. If I sit up and I am flex up top, well, first, now I have less of a shelf to place the bar. So now the bar is to be sitting deeper into my hand and my arms are basically supporting it. If I'm flexed up top, right here, I can barely get a brace. I can't really expand. Also, if I were to fight for extension, I'd have to actually pull my elbows in, let the bar roll. That's a lot of moving parts to begin a squat. We want to be able to simplify the setup. And as you know, when we're squatting, gravity and the weight is pulling us down. It's pulling us into flexion. So might as well start with that extension and then from there, find neutrality in the pelvis and in the lumbar. So what I tell my athletes is to get in a more extended position. Maybe if you even set up further in front of the bar and then find that shelf, because the more extension we generate, the bigger shelf we can also have to place the bar on. And from there, we walk it out. Watch, I'm now in the extended position throughout. My pelvis is slightly anteriorly rotated, as you can tell. And if I were to squat like this, I would simply max out my dorsiflexion and I'd run out of room to squat. So instead, I want to maintain a good degree of upper back extension, upper back tension. And from here, I will actually pull the bar down into my back. Reason being, because if I don't, and I were to inhale now, watch what happens. If I'm loose up top, it's still extended. But if I'm loose, if I inhale, the upper back literally expands and I'm losing all my brace. I'm really expanding even more. I'm getting into more anterior tilt. And my abdomen, they're stretching. And instead, I want to be able to have a little more neutrality in the pelvis. So from here, instead of bracing up top, I want to pull the bar down. Now I'm stabilized. And if I were to breathe, the oxygen or the air has nowhere else to go but into my stomach. Boom. See, look, I'm inhaling. The bar does not strut up as before. And now I'm ready to squat. But before we begin the squat, but after the pull down with the brace, we also want to throw in a slight exhale. Depending on how much we exhale, depending on your starting position. So we're super extended right here. Let's say we're right here. We exhale, as you notice, I'm going to get pulled down automatically. My abs are going to get crunched down automatically. My pelvis will be enter a slight more posterior tilted position. And my lumbar will get more neutral. So watch this. I'm here, I exhale, get pulled into neutrality. And from here, in this exhaled position, you're still braced. So maintain a braced position throughout all this. And from here, while you're braced, but slightly exhaled, you want to inhale into that brace now. So you're here, exhale. Now you're more in a neutral position. And from here, now we inhale into the brace as we're continuing to pull down. Like I said, we don't want that bar to shrug up. We want to maintain tension up top, maintain tension down low. It meets the middle and expands and centralizes the force. We should be generating as much tension and force as we can with that brace to stabilize the trunk and to create as much force output through the legs all the way up and maintaining optimal technique. And from here, then we feel the feet. Then we have ground contact. It's very important to maintain ground contact and conscious of ground contact after the brace. Let's say we walk out, we're here, and we have a tendency to fall into our toes. So our main combat point would be, okay, let me just dump onto the heel a little bit more. So let's say we dump onto the heel, and then we crunch or we exhale. Now we got into a little more flexion, but now we just dump further weight onto the heel. And from here, we're just going to run out of hip flexion. We're going to be stuck in this position. It's going to feel like we can't go anywhere, right? So instead, we cue the feet afterwards. So if we crunch down, we're going to notice we have a center of mass shift backwards. And then from there, we'll start shifting our center of mass forward to combat this to maintain, like I said, a good like tripod foot, center of mass foot. Tripod foot's not for everyone though. If you're a very high archer, if you have big arches in your feet, you may notice that your femurs and your tibias and your hips are just stuck in more an externally rotated position, right? And with more external rotation, we actually have less dorsiflexions. Watch what happens when I externally rotate and I try to maintain as much supination as possible as if someone were to have a high arch. And I'm going to just draw my ankles forward or my knees forward. Watch. That's pretty much all I got. I cannot go any further. Versus if I were to flatten the arches, big toe into the floor, watch how much more ankle flexion I can get. That's in a severe amount. Watch. I'm going to do it again. Externally rotate. Boom. That's pretty much it. Now I'm going to flatten them right now. I get way more. So if you're one of those high arch squatters, you may feel like, oh, I'm running out of ankle flexion. I need heels. That's not the end all be all. That's not the fix. That's just a band-aid at the moment. So instead, we want to pronate the foot in, flatten that foot, have more ground contact. Because imagine, the more contact we have with that foot to the floor, the stronger and more force output we can generate through the legs, of course, right? So flatten the foot, big toes to the floor. This is for people, like I said, that have high arches and are stuck in thinking they can't drive their knees as far forward. And they have a lot of like tension on the Achilles and so on. And then the inverse is also true. If you're a flat-footed squatter and you notice I'm running out of hip flexion, I'm almost stuck in like a valgus state, then you may benefit from that tripod foot, more outer heel action. That'll externally rotate the tibias, the femurs, get you a little more hip dominant, and you'll have more room to go down into the hole.
Thank you guys for tuning in on this episode of Bracing with Team P4P. We went over the setup in terms of the rack with the upper back positioning, as well as the belt positioning as well. And then last but not least,
we talked about flexion versus extension, where your starting point is, what are your natural tendencies, and how to address them. So if you're too extended at the start, may benefit from more of crunching down that exhale and then breathing into that. And like Phil said, when we start to flex, we may benefit from more extension, more of that artificial brace, and expanding that diaphragm, expanding into the belly as much as possible. But at the end of the day, we want to maintain upper back tension and as much tension throughout the entire body as possible to stabilize the spine and the trunk and maintain optimal technique and maximize force output through the floor. So yeah, any last words, Coach?
Yeah, where to find us? Instagram at Phil Strong and at
Joe Bornstein, and of course, our website, p4pcoach.com. So yeah, if you have any questions, shoot us in the DMs or comment down below. And yeah, can't wait for the next one. See you guys.